And it is the first hour of our program on Wednesday, so it's time for our hour-long Middays with Mark, where Congressman Mark Pocan, representing the 2nd District of Wisconsin, the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, the largest caucus in the Democratic Party. Pocan.house.gov is his website. You can tweet him at Rep. Mark Pocan, M-A-R-K-P-O-C-A-N, Rep as in representative, at Rep. Mark Pocan. And Congressman, welcome back.
Thanks, Tom. Glad to be here.
Always great having you with us. You're back in the district, so we don't have video of you, but it's great to hear your voice. So a lot going on right now in the news. I'm not sure exactly what you'd want to put at the top of this, but the town hall thing seems like a big one. The young people from Parkland and the movement that they have inspired. David Hogg, I guess, is the one who was leading the charge on this tweet of calling for members of Congress to be doing town halls. I don't think any Republicans, I haven't heard of a single Republican doing a town hall in months, but I'm guessing you're doing a lot of them. Yeah,
in fact, we saw the tweet that David put out, and we already had in the works 4 town halls, and we're maybe working on a surprise one that might be in a neighboring district as well, that we're not quite finalized on yet. But we have 4 that we're doing in my district. We had one last night, and this is like the most basic part of your job. My job is to take the views of South Central Wisconsin to Washington, D.C., and then to explain Washington, D.C. to South Central Wisconsin. And if you ignore the people that elect you by not having public town halls, you're not really doing your job. So, we've got 4 of them lined up for the next 2 weeks. Last night got a good variety of people. It was actually our biggest turnout ever we've had in Rock County, which happens to be the county that I share with Paul Ryan. And we had a few people who disagreed with us on a couple issues, but for the most part, a lot of people very, very concerned about the direction of the country under this president and this Congress.
Yeah, amen. By the way, the whole point of Middays with Mark is for people to call in and ask you whatever they would like, and our telephone number 202-808-9925 if you would like to speak with Congressman Mark Pocan. The Australian government back in 1996, after the Port Arthur massacre on April 28th of 96. This is from an Australian newspaper. Quote, banned automatic and semi-automatic firearms, adopted new licensing requirements. This is sort of my driver's license thing. Established a national firearms registry, which is my, register your car thing. Register your gun, instituted a 28-day waiting period for gun purchases, and bought and destroyed more than 600,000 civilian-owned firearms in a scheme that cost $500 million and was funded by raising taxes. The conservative government now, John Howard, the sort of George W. Bush of Australia, he's no longer in office, but he said, quote, it is incontestable that gun-related homicides have fallen quite significantly in Australia. We have a 74% decline in gun-involved suicide rates as evidence of the legislation working. He was originally opposed to this legislation. Where are we at in the United States, and what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, first of all, Tom, it's so funny. Not 24 hours ago, I was using this very example to the Beloit Daily News, which is, Beloit's the 2nd largest city in my district, but it's just south of Janesville, where Paul Ryan's from. And the editorial board, one of the main editor who describes himself as a conservative, said, well, what do we really need to do? Like, what's the real issues around this? I'm like, look, Australia is a country that is very, very similar to us. They actually went ahead and addressed gun violence because they recognized guns is one of the 2 words in gun violence, and because of it, they significantly reduced what happened, and we have to look at them to see what would work in this country. And, right now, all we've done in Congress was a bit more than lip service. We passed a bill that put $75 million out over a year for the next 10 years to address things like hotlines and some school security improvements and around the edge sort of stuff. But just to give you an idea, I had a conservative woman last night at the town hall said, okay, so the governor in Wisconsin is going to put $100 million towards school safety. How would you spend it? And I had to compare $100 million by a conservative governor who wasn't planning on doing anything serious in Wisconsin versus nationwide we were putting $75 million in a year. That's nothing. So that's all that Congress has done so far. So we've done the bare minimum, and yet there are a lot of issues we should address, from background checks to the use of automatic weapons to a bunch of other issues that you just mentioned that Australia looked at and that we've introduced in bills in the United States. 2 of them we've done discharge petitions on so that we can try to actually force a vote. But again, this is a different time. I feel like this movement, having last Saturday be the largest youth organized rally since Vietnam War, there's some legs on this, and we have to take advantage of this opportunity to listen to the people who are going to be most impacted in the future by this and impacted every single day when they go to school. So Australia is a perfect example, I think, to point to, Tom, when we want to talk about how it's worked somewhere else and why it can work here.
Yeah, the guy who led the campaign in '96 did an interview with this newspaper, and he said, one day during a TV interview, I said, we register cars, we register boats, we even register dogs, so what's the problem with registering guns? It was the perfect soundbite. The next day, a senior police official repeated the very same line on national television. From that point on, the air seemed to go right out of the gun lobby's tires. So, interesting.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, a big part of this, too, if I can, Tom, is just, you know, what I noticed at the rally we had in Wisconsin was we started defining the NRA for what they really are. The NRA is not the family in Wisconsin that every fall goes hunting as a family tradition because no one's going after their rifle. And the NRA is not a person who, you know, might live alone in a tough neighborhood and has the, you know, a handgun for personal protection. That's not the NRA. The NRA is a bunch of gun manufacturers who want to sell more guns so that they can take more vacations and have bigger garages than their neighbors. That is the NRA. And the sooner we get to people understanding the NRA doesn't care what happens once they sell the gun, they just want to sell more guns, then we can, I think, really start to define this issue as it's not people who think they're the NRA. It's the NRA is a lobby of gun manufacturers trying to make more money, and they don't care at what cost.
Yeah, it certainly seems to be the case. I have other questions about the census, about Paul Ryan, about Stormy Daniels, but I see that many of those questions are already on the board here with people calling in, so I'll let our listeners ask you what's going on. And so, ready to pick up some phone calls here?
Absolutely. Tom.
Okay, let's go for it. Helen in Ithaca, New York, listening to WRSI. You are on the air with Congressman Mark Pocan. Helen.
Hi, good afternoon or good morning, Congressman and Tom. I wanted to see what the congressman, what his opinion is, and what the Democrats might be doing about this, which I think is an attempt to maximize Republican votes, to put the question on the census as to whether or not one is an immigrant, and that has not appeared on a census since 1950.
Yeah, Helen, a great point. This is one of those issues that they did, you know, without a lot of warning. All of a sudden they decided to add a question about the census, about citizenship on the census. And I was listening to, and don't ask me why, a conservative talk radio host out of Milwaukee this morning while I was on the treadmill. And you know, they've started this lie saying, oh, Bill Clinton had the exact same question, and it's not true. The last time, as you said, that this question was asked was in 1950. So for us to go back to 1950, there must be a really, really good reason other than they're trying to cook the books on how they do the census in order to try to, again, affect politicians picking their voters rather than the other way around. And it has a lot of ramifications around assistance and monies that go out. If you scare people off, and right now is certainly a time people are scared off by the federal government, if you're a non-citizen, there's a lot of reasons to be afraid of the government and what they'll do with this kind of data. So it's, again, part of that thuggish behavior that we see repeated over and over and over by Donald Trump and his administration to try to scare people into not filling out these things, the surveys, and it will have a really negative impact. So I was glad to see Javier Becerra, my old colleague, who's now the Attorney General in California, along with, I think it's a dozen states suing on this front. They think they have a good case based on constitutional grounds, and I tend to agree from what I've heard of how they've presented it. And you're right, though. This is another way of Republicans trying to cook the books and trying to pick their voters rather than allowing the system to work.
That's great. Congressman Mark Pocan is with us. It is Middays with Mark here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Congressman Pocan taking your calls for the hour. The lines are all full now, as it appears. And so we will be picking up your calls and more right after this. You can check out Congressman Pocan's website at Pocan, Pocan.house.gov. And you can tweet him at Rep. Mark Pocan. He is the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, the largest caucus in the Democratic Party. We'll be right back.